We had been married for 9 years after dating for a year. Dr. Julian Mercer was the most prestigious surgeon in the United States, plagued with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder and extreme germophobia. The fountain pen he used had never, not even once, changed its place on his desk. Eleanor Sterling called her personal attorney. "Harrison, I think I'm going to need you to file a divorce petition. Please get the paperwork ready." Eleanor and Julian had been married in Las Vegas, Nevada. Under local state law, it was entirely possible to file for a no-fault divorce without the other party's consent. Miss Sterling, to file for a divorce of this nature, certain conditions must be met. Before Harrison could finish, Eleanor interrupted him. "My husband has been unfaithful." "Understood, ma'am. I'll prepare it immediately," the lawyer responded swiftly. After hanging up, Eleanor turned to the clerk at the Fifth Avenue Patek Philippe boutique with a smile. "Excuse me, it seems I won't be needing this watch after all. Could you recommend one suitable for an older gentleman?" Originally, Eleanor was going to buy Julian a limited edition Patek Philippe Nautilus. He was an extremely punctual man. He was supposed to return home tonight at 9, but an issue with a medical supplier had delayed his schedule. However, none of that mattered anymore. Eleanor ended up buying a much more expensive, customized, astronomical chronograph for her father. Stepping out of the luxury department store with the shopping bag bearing the Calatrava Cross logo, she received a call from Julian. His voice, as always, was serene. "An emergency surgery came up. I won't be able to come home today or tomorrow." "All right." Eleanor's voice was a calm sea. "I left some homemade organic chicken soup prepared in the kitchen. Make sure to have it when you get back." "I will," Julian promised. Hearing his words, Eleanor was lost in thought for a moment. Julian Mercer, the youngest chief of neurosurgery in the country, was a man who prepared broths for her with his own hands. Julian loved her. But love must be unique, exclusive. And when Julian still harbored another woman in his heart, that love had become corrupted. "Eleanor?" he asked. Surprised by her silence, Eleanor snapped back to reality and answered the phone. "All right, hurry back to the hospital." Only then did Julian hang up. Eleanor got into the waiting Maybach and instructed her secretary, Audrey, to prepare the private jet. She took off for New York City at maximum speed. Hours later, the next day, arriving at Penthouse, one of the Waldorf residences on the Upper East Side, her late-night suspicions were confirmed. The door opened on its own before she could enter the passcode. Standing inside was Chloe Sinclair, Julian's first love from his teenage years and the most popular girl in their high school. With her wavy burgundy hair, she wore a silk nightgown. Seeing Eleanor, she smiled charmingly. "Eleanor, you're back. Don't take this the wrong way. Yesterday I twisted my ankle at home, and Julian was just helping me out." Without changing her expression, Eleanor asked, "Since when have you been here?" "For 2 weeks. Julian told me the guest room was free. I just moved back to the States and I was too lazy to apartment hunt." Chloe left the sentence hanging on purpose. She wanted to see Eleanor angry, hurt. As a woman, Eleanor knew exactly what she was trying to do. She nodded. "Ah, I see." Walking past her, Eleanor offered some polite advice. "Even so, Chloe, it would be best if you looked for an apartment soon. You can't stay here forever." Back in the master bedroom on the second floor, an indescribable bitterness filled Eleanor's eyes. A moment ago, she had seen a ring hanging from a silver chain on Chloe's neck, and Julian had an identical one. Eleanor had seen it in a drawer in his study. Passing by the kitchen, the soup in the pot was still steaming. Eleanor had a delicate stomach, and Julian, as a doctor, had managed her diet for years, but now she had no desire to taste it. In the wee hours of the morning, Julian, who had finished his surgery earlier than expected, returned home. He was surprised to find Eleanor sitting alone, wide awake. "Eleanor, you're not sleeping?" She looked at him in silence. White shirt, black slacks. The simplest combination enhanced Julian's distinguished aura. "I wasn't sleepy," she replied. Julian raised his hand and touched her forehead. Only after confirming her temperature was normal did he sigh in relief. "It's cold out. Be careful not to catch a cold." After saying this, he headed to the bathroom. Julian was a severe germaphobe. After a surgery, he disinfected himself completely. After touching anyone, including his wife, he washed his hands or even took a shower. However, this time it took less than 10 minutes for him to rush out in a bathrobe, holding his cell phone. "Eleanor?" Chloe fell down the stairs. "I'm going to see what happened." Before Eleanor could respond, Julian was already taking long strides toward the door. When she followed him, she saw him holding Chloe in his arms, his face showing pure anguish. In that instant, Eleanor understood that Julian's germophobia didn't apply to everyone. Chloe was his exception. The ambulance from Street Luke's medical center arrived quickly, and the paramedics placed Chloe on a stretcher. Eleanor handed a long coat to Julian, who was only wearing his bathrobe. He seemed to realize his mistake, and his face showed a hint of embarrassment. "Eleanor, don't get the wrong idea. Chloe is just a friend." Before Eleanor could speak, a paramedic approached. "Is there a family member for the patient? Someone needs to accompany us to the hospital." "I will," Julian replied without hesitation. "I'm her emergency contact." Realizing his slip, he corrected himself. "I'm her friend. I'll go with her." He glanced sideways at Eleanor and climbed into the ambulance. The vehicle sped away, leaving Eleanor alone, wrapped in a tangle of emotions. She had always believed Julian truly loved her. Despite his germophobia, he had never rejected her. Despite his schedule, he made time to cook for her. He was cold to others but tender with her. Yet, in front of Chloe, all of that seemed to vanish. The next morning, at the executive suite of the Sterling Group, "Miss Sterling, the divorce proceedings with Mr. Mercer have begun. The relevant documents have been filed with the court in Nevada," Harrison reported clearly. Eleanor, wearing her gold-rimmed glasses, stared absently out the window. "How do you plan to handle the division of assets?" The lawyer continued. Eleanor snapped out of it, gently massaging her temples. "I'll keep the Waldorf penthouse on the Upper East Side. The rest of the marital assets will be split down the middle according to the law." That penthouse was the first thing she bought with her own money after becoming independent. After her father's death, it had become her only home. She couldn't hand it over to Julian. "Ma'am, given the other party's evident infidelity, we could leave him with nothing," Harrison added. Eleanor smiled bitterly. "That's not necessary. Divide the assets in half. Consider it payment for saving my life." 10 years ago, Eleanor had been in critical condition after falling into a trap set by corporate rivals. Despite the opposition of other doctors, Julian insisted on operating on her, saving her life. Therefore, giving him half the assets was fair. Harrison didn't insist further. "In a week, the divorce papers will be sent to New York. Where should we forward them?" In Nevada, the final decree carried the same weight as a divorce certificate. To Street Luke's Medical Center. Street Luke's was the place Julian spent the most time outside of their home. Eleanor added, "The Sterling Group is expanding its domestic market and will relocate its headquarters to Chicago. Therefore, after the divorce, we will suspend all support to Street Luke's. Charitable funds, medical equipment, laboratories, pharmaceutical plants, all that support had been Eleanor's favoritism toward Julian. But now that they were separating, there should be no more ties." "Understood," Harrison nodded. "And the watch I bought the other day, please bring it to my office. Thank you. Also, book me a flight to Chicago for a week from now." And finally, Eleanor said, "I don't want the divorce to become a media spectacle. To avoid negatively impacting the company." Harrison nodded. Only then did Eleanor stand up and head to the elevator. She was going to visit Chloe. She wanted to see what was so special about the woman Julian couldn't forget. At Street Luke's Medical Center, right as Eleanor walked past the nurse's station, she heard the nurses whispering, "The woman with Dr. Mercer must be his wife. They make a beautiful couple." Yeah, it's true. The doctor was giving her water and administering her medication personally. His wife must be very happy. Eleanor approached expressionless and tapped gently on the counter. "Excuse me, could you tell me which room Miss Chloe Sinclair is admitted to?" The nurse, impressed by Eleanor's elegant and chic appearance with her sunglasses, hurriedly checked the records. "Miss Sinclair is in VIP room 1218. Would you like me to escort you?" "No, thank you." When Eleanor's back disappeared from sight, the nurse muttered, 1,218 is Dr. Mercer's wife's room. What connection does that woman have to her?" Hearing this, a shadow of melancholy crossed Eleanor's eyes. She and Julian had married privately, and very few people knew her true identity, but it no longer mattered. The title of Mrs. Mercer would soon have a new owner. Eleanor reached VIP room 1218. Before opening the door, she saw Julian and Chloe embracing through the door's window. "Julian, if I hadn't gone abroad back then, would I be your wife right now?" Chloe asked with red eyes, resting her head on his shoulder. For some reason, Eleanor's heart also shrank. She wanted to know the answer but dreaded facing it at the same time. Then, she heard Julian's response. Yes. The inevitable reality had finally crashed down on Eleanor. She knocked on the door and, after receiving permission, slowly opened it. While their gazes settled on her, she maintained a polite smile. "Miss Sinclair, are you feeling better?" Eleanor offered her the fruit basket she had brought. Chloe accepted it. "Thank you, I'm fine. It's Julian who worries too much." Julian tried to explain. "Eleanor, yesterday Chloe's condition was critical. That's why I stayed at the hospital with her. Don't get the wrong idea." "I know," Eleanor nodded. "Don't worry." She had always been this understanding. But that day, her words sounded strangely uncomfortable to Julian. Chloe spoke again from the bed. "Eleanor, Julian has been like this since high school. He seems cold, but he's very warm inside. Don't worry. As soon as I recover, I'll move out of your house. I won't bother Julian anymore." Her words were a way to show off her long intimacy with Julian while playing the victim. Eleanor played along. "With my work and Julian so busy at the hospital, it's true that we don't have time to take care of you. That's why I've hired a private nurse and rented an apartment near the hospital. It'll be more comfortable for your recovery." She barely finished speaking when 2 home health aides entered the room with Chloe's luggage. Chloe's face hardened. She shot a pleading look at Julian. Perhaps Julian also thought it was inappropriate to have his first love at home because he didn't object. "Chloe, Eleanor is right. A nurse will be more professional than us." Chloe said nothing else. At that moment, Julian checked his watch. "I have another surgery. Go home first. Don't wait up for me." "All right," Eleanor nodded. Julian left, and the nurses began their tasks. Only Eleanor and Chloe remained in the room. Chloe looked at her with arrogance. "Do you think I don't know? You only got close to Julian for his money. If it weren't for him, how would you live on the Upper East Side?" She mocked. "A gold digger like you doesn't suit him. But don't worry, when you divorce, I'll make sure he gives you a good settlement." Eleanor couldn't help but find it ridiculous. "I see Mr. Mercer hasn't told you who I am," Chloe replied with disdain. "What does it matter who you are? Julian doesn't love you. He's with you only to distract himself from the pain of losing me, forcing himself to settle. If it hadn't been you, he would have married anyone else. Then I hope your dream comes true," Eleanor answered ambiguously and turned to leave. Downstairs, she got into the waiting car. She looked toward Street, Luke's medical center. It was probably the last time she would ever be there. Goodbye, and may we never meet again. In the dark of the night, Julian had still not returned home. Eleanor sent him a text message. "Did you finish the surgery? When are you coming back?" Surprisingly, Julian responded immediately. "The actual surgery is over. He's tired. He fell asleep next to me. Don't interrupt us." The tone was clearly Chloe's. Eleanor's hand trembled, almost dropping the phone. She understood that Julian's true home was wherever Chloe was. Eleanor's gaze settled on the wedding photo hanging in the center of the bedroom, taken at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. She was 21. Her father had not yet died of cancer. With his last ounces of strength, he had placed Eleanor's hand in Julian's. "Please take care of her, cherish her, and make my daughter happy." That was his last wish for his son-in-law while he was conscious. And Julian swore, "I will love Eleanor my whole life and treat her well always." But he had broken his promise. Perhaps love was fickle by nature, and the word eternal was just an ornament. Eleanor looked at Chloe's message again and typed a new one. "Tomorrow is the anniversary of my dad's death. I have something to tell you." After sending it, she turned off her phone. That night, she tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. The next morning, at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, the sky was cloudy, and a fine drizzle was falling. Her father loved wine. Eleanor had several cases of red wine and champagne brought to the headstone. She poured the contents of a bottle onto the ground. Dad, he cheated on me. He has always loved someone else. I haven't been happy all these years. In front of the person who had loved her the most, her voice finally broke. But only the sound of the rain answered her. Some time passed. A clear umbrella blocked the cold raindrops. Turning around, Eleanor saw Julian, impeccable in a black suit. His amber eyes were full of concern. He gently stroked her cheek. Eleanor, why are you crying? Julian's fingertips were warm. He seemed completely unaware that he had touched her wet cheek without disinfecting himself. Eleanor saw a long burgundy hair on the lapel of his suit. She took a step back and pushed his hand away. It's nothing, I just missed my father. Julian's voice was soft. Don't be sad. Your father is watching over you from heaven, and I'll always be by your side. Looking at her red eyes, he asked again, What did you want to tell me by text? Eleanor was going to talk about the divorce, but the words stayed on the tip of her tongue. She changed the subject. In 5 days is your birthday. I have a gift prepared for you. Before she finished, Julian's phone rang. Pulling it out, Chloe's name appeared on the screen. He frowned and hung up, but Chloe called again, insistently. The ringtone echoed through the cemetery. As Julian was about to turn off his phone, Eleanor spoke. Answer it. Maybe it's an emergency. Saying that, Eleanor stepped out from under the umbrella. A bodyguard waiting nearby immediately opened one for her. Only then did Julian answer. Chloe's pitiful voice was heard. Julian, I'm alone at the hospital and I'm so scared. Conflict filled Julian's eyes. Eleanor said calmly. If you're so worried, go. Hearing this, Julian sighed in relief. I'll come home tonight to be with you. All right. Eleanor nodded. Julian turned and left. Eleanor watched his back until he disappeared. She turned to her father's grave and whispered, Dad, I'm sorry. I chose the wrong person. I haven't known how to make myself happy. I'm ashamed to look at you. Only the wind and rain replied. Upon returning home, Eleanor felt her temperature rise slightly. Her primary care physician came over and prescribed a fever reducer. But in the dark of night, Eleanor felt the fever return. She reached her hand to the other side of the bed. But it was cold and empty. Julian had broken his promise. He hadn't returned home. Eleanor opened her text thread with him. She saw a message from 3 hours ago. I'm sorry, Eleanor. Chloe is emotionally unstable. I think I'll have to stay with her at the hospital tonight. It was the first time he had ever apologized to Eleanor because of another woman. Eleanor looked at the wedding photo on the nightstand. In it, both were smiling, but it seemed only she was genuinely happy. All right, Eleanor replied. The heart doesn't grow cold in an instant. True goodbyes always arrive in silence. At 9:30 in the morning, Julian arrived home punctually with breakfast. Eleanor, he called out of habit, but there was no response. Julian bit his lip, took off his coat, disinfected himself, and carefully entered the bedroom. Seeing Eleanor in bed, he sighed in relief without realizing it. He sat on the edge of the bed and saw a half-used bottle of pills. At that moment, Eleanor opened her eyes. You're back. Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Concern filled his eyes. Eleanor replied calmly. Just a mild cold. I'm fine now. Besides, would Julian have left Chloe to come to her side if she had told him? No. She didn't want to humiliate herself. Julian didn't ask further. He noticed the nightstand was empty. Where is our wedding photo? He was hypersensitive to the arrangement of every object in the house. It was a bit faded. I took it to get restored, Eleanor improvised. She knew Julian wouldn't mind. As expected, Julian just nodded. I brought breakfast, your favorites. Thank you, Eleanor replied politely. When she came out of the bathroom, her usual breakfast was served on the table. Avocado toast with premium artisanal bacon, the bread toasted just right, and fresh squeezed orange juice. For 10 years, Julian had remembered her tastes. Eleanor was lost in thought for a moment. If Chloe didn't exist in Julian's heart, this life would have been truly happy. But in the real world, there are no ifs. Julian, if you have time today, let's go out for a bit, Eleanor proposed suddenly. Julian didn't hesitate. Sure. After breakfast, Eleanor watched Julian change and disinfect his hands, feeling a pang of bitterness. Julian, today will be our final goodbye. Without a chauffeur or escort, they arrived at the New York Aquarium. Colorful tropical fish swam in schools inside a gigantic tank. In fact, Julian and Eleanor had once owned betta fish, but as novices, they didn't know they had to be kept alone. Otherwise, they would fight until they killed each other. At that moment, an aquarium guide enthusiastically approached. Sir, ma'am, what do you think of the butterfly fish? They're completely monogamous. If one dies, the other never seeks another mate. It's a beautiful symbol. Why was loyalty a beautiful symbol? However, for some reason, Eleanor suddenly asked Julian, Dr. Mercer, if I died, what would you do? Hearing the question, Julian frowned and scolded her. Don't say things like that. Then, with a serious expression, he said, If you left this world, it wouldn't take long for me to follow you. Eleanor froze for a moment. Julian's tone was undeniably firm, but that couldn't hide the fact that his heart harbored love for another woman. In the end, Eleanor bought a pair of butterfly fish and a small tank. Julian, how about we put this in your office? She proposed. I want you to think of me every time you see them. I'll be leaving your side soon, too. No problem. Julian accepted immediately. On the way back, surprisingly, they took the subway. The train car was crowded. Julian unexpectedly wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. It was unprecedented intimacy initiated by him. But right at that moment, his phone rang again. Eleanor, can you answer it for me? It's in my pocket, Julian asked casually. Eleanor realized that by holding her in public, he seemed to have forgotten his germophobia. She pulled out his phone without thinking. It was Chloe. Julian, where are you? I wanted you to be here with me. Chloe's voice on the other end was sweet and flirtatious. Julian looked at Eleanor, speechless. He felt embarrassed, and a strange uneasiness sprouted in his chest. He felt that if he went to Chloe today, he would lose Eleanor forever. But Eleanor loved him so much. How could she ever leave him? Go, Eleanor said considerately. I'll tell the chauffeur to pick me up at the next stop. At that moment, the train's automated announcement echoed over the speakers. Next stop, Horizon Station. End of the line. For some reason, both remained silent. The train reached the final stop. Eleanor, this is the last time. I promise you, Julian consoled her. All right, Eleanor nodded. When Julian was about to turn around with the butterfly fish, Eleanor's cold hand grabbed his wrist again. He was a bit surprised but didn't resist. What's wrong? Eleanor tightened her grip, then slowly released it until their fingers intertwined. She shook her head. It's nothing. I just suddenly felt that we've gotten too used to each other. Don't you think? Julian bit his lip and nodded. We've been together for 10 years. It's normal to be used to it. Then, from now on, I'll have to try not to get so used to it. After all, in just 4 days, she would completely disappear from Julian's world. Eleanor smiled softly and let go of his hand little by little. Julian felt a void in his chest. Hurry up. Go. Don't make her wait too long, Eleanor urged him. Julian looked at her deeply, then turned and left. Until his figure disappeared, Eleanor looked at the platform signs for Horizon Station. Perhaps Julian would never know that those who arrive at the end of the line sometimes never meet again. In Julian's life, there would never be a second Eleanor Sterling. 7:30 p.m. Penthouse 1 of the Waldorf Residences. Eleanor contemplated the house she had shared with Julian for 9 years. Medical books on the shelf, a thermos on the kitchen island, green bamboo on the balcony. His traces were everywhere. Eleanor entered the walk-in closet. Julian preferred a minimalist black and white style. She liked colorful and striking clothes. Their clothes, hanging side by side, looked harmonious, yet completely mismatched, much like the 10 years they had spent deceiving each other. Exhausted, Eleanor sent a message to her secretary. Audrey, call some movers. Right away, ma'am, Audrey replied quickly. Eleanor contacted attorney Harrison again. Harrison, please transfer the condo I own in the West Village to Mr. Mercer. I've already arranged for his things to be moved there. The West Village was a 15-minute drive from Street Luke's. Julian had originally wanted to buy their marital home there, but his work schedule prevented him from apartment hunting. Eleanor suggested the Waldorf penthouse held a special meaning, and they finally settled on it. Last year, Eleanor had bought back that exact West Village condo and completely renovated it. It was meant to be her gift for Julian's 30th birthday. Only now, she wouldn't be celebrating it with him. Not the 30th, nor any other. Watching the movers pack Julian's things away one by one, Eleanor didn't feel the sadness she expected. Falling in love was simple. Falling out of love was too. When the secretary left with the movers, Eleanor reminded her, "Do not tell anyone that I'm moving to Chicago or relocating the company's headquarters." Audrey nodded seriously. "Understood, ma'am. I'll make sure no one at the Sterling Group leaks a word." Eleanor nodded. When Audrey and the others left, the penthouse returned to silence. It had finally regained its original appearance, a home only for Eleanor Sterling. Meanwhile, at Street Luke's medical center, in the surgeon's office, Julian silently watched the butterfly fish swimming in the small tank, his heart restless. He remembered the situation when he went to Chloe's room. "Julian, did she buy that for you?" Chloe asked suddenly from the bed when he carefully placed the tank on his desk. "Have you fallen in love with that woman?" "Of course not," Julian denied almost instinctively. "It's just habit." Chloe reached out her hand to him. "That's a toxic habit. You need to break it." Julian lightly squeezed Chloe's fingertips, fixed her blanket, and didn't answer. A butterfly fish suddenly bumped against the glass. The faint tap snapped Julian out of his thoughts. He looked at his desk. The pen holder, the filing cabinet, the fountain pen, everything was from Tiffany & Co. The pen holder and the cabinet had small daisy stickers on them. Eleanor loved daisies. In fact, everywhere Julian looked, there were traces of Eleanor. The high-end massage chair that cost $20,000. The green velvet curtains chosen by Eleanor because they were good for his eyes after long shifts. Julian was lost in thought. His entire world was furnished by Eleanor. As if possessed, he took out his phone and opened his text thread with her. There were no unread messages. Julian frowned instantly. How was it possible? Eleanor always texted to share her day or at least ask what time he would be home. Julian took a picture of the fish tank and sent it to her as a test. "Eleanor, the fish are adapting well." 2 hours passed, and Eleanor didn't reply. Julian's heart sank. Just as he was about to call her, a text bubbled up. "Good. I hope they live happily ever after." Only then did Julian sigh in relief. "Eleanor, I have several major surgeries at the hospital I need to supervise tonight. I'll be working late. Don't wait up." After sending this message, a nurse paged him, and he entered a consultation. He had no idea that at that very moment, Eleanor was permanently drawing a line between them. The next day at noon, the doorbell rang at Penthouse 1. Eleanor thought it was a food delivery, but upon opening the door, she found Chloe standing there, without a single trace of injury. "Miss Sinclair, what can I do for you?" "Obviously, I'm here to tell you to step aside." "Just divorced Julian." Chloe crossed her arms and scowled. Julian's reaction yesterday had made her sense a crisis. "Don't speak, just listen." Chloe dialed Julian's number, put it on speakerphone, and signaled Eleanor to stay quiet. "Julian, it's me. I need to ask you something. You have to answer me honestly." "Yeah?" Eleanor heard Julian's soft reply. "Do you really love Eleanor Sterling?" Chloe asked bluntly. Eleanor held her breath. Julian remained silent for a while before answering. "Chloe, we've been together for 10 years. I've just gotten used to having her by my side. So, it's just habit, not love, right?" Chloe insisted. "Right," Julian replied. Hearing that answer, both Eleanor and Chloe smiled. Eleanor's smile was tinged with profound bitterness. She realized she had wasted 10 years on unrequited love. Chloe's smile was mocking, thinking Eleanor had simply been overly confident. For 2 days, Julian truly didn't return home. To the scarce texts he sent between his shifts, Eleanor replied with one-word answers. When love reaches its end, it's irreversible. It's better to cut your losses and become strangers again. At the Waldorf penthouse, Eleanor sat by the living room window, deep in thought. Tomorrow, she would leave for Chicago. Julian hadn't come home, nor had he sent any more messages. Suddenly, a fountain pen sitting on a side table caught her eye. It was Julian's favorite, the very same one that made her decide to leave. It must have been left behind by the movers. Since they were officially separating, she figured she'd return it. Eleanor grabbed her keys and headed to the underground garage. 30 minutes later, she arrived at Street Luke's. Walking toward Julian's office, she overheard two patients chatting in the hallway. "I hear Dr. Mercer only drops his germophobia around his wife. With her, anything goes." "Yeah, I've seen it too. I wonder what they're like when they're alone." First, the nurses, now the patients. Everyone confused Chloe with Julian's wife. Ignoring them, Eleanor reached Julian's door, only for an admin to tell her, "Dr. Mercer took the day off today. He's not in." "Ah, okay," she nodded. Then she headed up to Chloe's recovery room. If he took the day off and wasn't at the penthouse, surely he would be with her. But the hospital room was impeccably tidy and completely empty. "Excuse me, has Miss Sinclair been discharged?" Eleanor asked a passing nurse. The nurse nodded. "Yes. Doctor Mercer signed her out this morning and took her home." Hearing this, Eleanor gripped the pen in her pocket. She knew the apartment she had rented for Chloe was completely empty since the nurse had been dismissed. Eleanor took out her phone and called Julian. Chloe answered, "Julian is with me. He's not coming back. After his birthday tomorrow, we're filing for divorce." Eleanor asked calmly, "Is that his decision or yours?" On the other end, Chloe scoffed. "Obviously, it's Julian's." With that, she hung up. Eleanor looked at the phone, unable to hide her sheer disappointment. She gripped the pen and sighed. In the end, she couldn't even return it in person. It was pitch black outside, 9:43 p.m. For the first time in 10 years, Julian was spending the night away from home. He had always claimed that any place other than the hospital or his pristine penthouse was crawling with germs. Whenever he went anywhere new, he had to disinfect it obsessively, which was why he hated going out. But around Chloe, his phobias and OCD seemingly vanished. Eleanor couldn't help but remember what she had heard the patient say. "I find it hard to imagine how Dr. Mercer, with that germophobia, treats his wife in bed. He must love her with all his being." Eleanor looked down. She remembered her nights with Julian over the past decade. He had always been rigid, overly cautious, and no matter how late it was, after being intimate, he immediately had to go scrub himself clean. Indeed, you can always tell who a man really loves by the smallest details. 9:02 a.m. Julian still showed no signs of life. Eleanor took the diamond ring off her left hand. Julian had personally sourced the raw diamonds during a Doctors Without Borders trip to Sierra Leone. Their clarity was astonishing. Eleanor had fallen in love with the ring at first sight, just as she had fallen in love with Julian. The ring, along with the fountain pen, went into a manila envelope. Finally, Eleanor pulled out a piece of stationery and wrote a one-line message for Mr. Mercer. Leaving it on the counter, she grabbed her suitcase and walked out. She took out her phone and sent Julian one last text. "Happy birthday." Then, she deleted his contact, pulled out her SIM card, and swapped it for a new one. Sitting in first class, heading to Chicago, Eleanor felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. Julian, now we're worlds apart, we'll never cross paths again. Meanwhile, at Street Luke's, Julian rushed into his office after checking on Chloe. He had barely plugged his phone into the charger when a nurse knocked on the door. "Dr. Mercer, you have certified mail. Thanks." Julian took the thick envelope. There was no return address. Puzzled, he sliced it open. Inside was a stack of legal documents. Julian frowned, skimming through the legalese. Shockingly, it was a divorce decree. By the authority of the state of Nevada, the marriage between the plaintiff Eleanor Sterling and the defendant Julian Mercer is hereby dissolved. Julian read the words out loud. The instant his brain processed the meaning, his heart stopped. He immediately stood up and ran out, frantically calling Eleanor's number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He opened his text thread and saw Eleanor's final message. "Happy birthday. Eleanor, why is your phone off?" Message failed to send. Panicking, Julian ignored the stares of his colleagues, hailed a cab, and raced to the Waldorf penthouse. Passcode incorrect. The security panel chimed ruthlessly. Julian lowered his head in frustration. Then, he noticed an envelope resting against the base of the door. Tearing it open, the diamond ring and his favorite pen clattered onto the hallway floor. The handwritten note read, "Give the ring to the woman you truly love. We will never meet again." Julian's hands shook so badly he dropped the light piece of paper. He didn't want to believe it, but he had to accept it. The Eleanor he knew had always been fiercely decisive. Julian picked up the ring. Before his eyes flashed the memory from 9 years ago. Dropping to one knee to propose. And the blinding flashbulbs at their grandiose New York wedding. That day, the paparazzi had swarmed them. Eleanor's father was a famous Wall Street philanthropist, and Eleanor was his sole heir. They were New York royalty. Julian remembered how the tycoons at the reception looked at him. "You're a lucky guy. I hear you're a surgeon. Well, Eleanor's money will make sure you never have to work a stressful day again." An older investor had patted his shoulder and laughed. Julian had frowned, his lips pressed tight, feeling entirely out of his depth. He felt like a charity case in the eyes of those billionaires. Luckily, Eleanor had swooped in to save him. Her custom-made designer gown had cost millions, but she didn't care about the glitz. "Uncle, don't joke like that. Julian is incredible. He literally saved my life." Eleanor had linked her arm through Julian's. Even though she felt his body go stiff, she kept her radiant smile. "If it weren't for Dr. Mercer, you and my dad would be delivering eulogies right now." "Hey, on such a beautiful day, don't talk like that." "My apologies, Dr. Mercer." The middle-aged man's tone instantly softened. "Since you're family now, take good care of our Eleanor." "I will." Julian had sworn sincerely. Despite the media circus, not a single wedding photo had leaked to the tabloids. Eleanor had told Julian later, "I know you hate the spotlight and value your privacy. I paid off the press pool so they wouldn't run the pictures." She had solved his anxiety with her checkbook. Julian knew she was just fiercely protecting him. At the beginning, they really were happy. But how did it all unravel? What pushed Eleanor to leave without a single word? Standing outside the locked door of the home they built, Julian agonized. Was it the text from Chloe I didn't hide well enough? Did I mumble her name in my sleep? But Eleanor had never once confronted him about Chloe. He assumed she was oblivious, but you can't hide a fire in a paper bag. His lingering obsession with his high school ex was painfully obvious to his wife. Had Eleanor thought he was just a coward stringing her along? How had she endured it all this time? Julian desperately needed answers. He found the number for Audrey, Eleanor's executive assistant, and called her. "Audrey, I need to know where Eleanor is. Please tell me." His voice cracked, almost begging. Audrey's tone was ice-cold and utterly professional. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer. I do not disclose Miss Sterling's itinerary, and frankly, whether you ask me, the company drivers, or any executive at the Sterling Group, you will get the exact same answer." With that, Audrey hung up and blocked his number. Julian realized Eleanor must have given strict orders. She was completely wiping him from her life. But Julian refused to give up. He tried calling their private chauffeur, only to get a deadline. He was blocked across the board. Just as Julian hit rock bottom, Attorney Harrison appeared in the lobby of the hospital the next morning. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer. I'm the legal counsel representing Miss Sterling. Since your marriage has been legally dissolved, we need to finalize the division of your joint assets." Harrison smiled tightly. "Is there somewhere quiet we can speak?" Julian nodded mechanically. If he had held on to any delusion that this was a misunderstanding, seeing the high-powered attorney destroyed it, Eleanor was truly done with him. Harrison sat across from Julian in a nearby coffee shop, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Mercer, you and Miss Sterling were married in Nevada. Nevada is a strict, no-fault state. Miss Sterling didn't need your signature or consent to finalize this dissolution. What grounds did she cite?" A vague thought crossed Julian's mind, but he quickly dismissed it. Eleanor had seemed so completely unfazed lately. At that moment, a sickening realization hit Julian. Every single time Chloe had needed him, whether he hesitated or actively asked Eleanor if she minded, Eleanor had just smiled softly and packed her husband off to be with another woman. No jealousy, no fights, no ultimatums. She hadn't even raised her voice when Chloe literally moved into their guest room. That level of apathy only meant two things. First, Eleanor knew exactly who Chloe was. Second, Eleanor had already checked out of the marriage. Disappointment after disappointment, she had simply chosen to cut her losses. Her eerie calm over the last few weeks wasn't understanding it was her actively letting him go. Julian's face went sheet white. She filed, citing irreconcilable differences. But considering your blatant adultery, she holds all the leverage, Harrison stated coldly. His client, Eleanor Sterling, was a titan of American industry. She never should have wasted a decade on a man like this. Moving on, Mr. Mercer. Per Miss Sterling's instructions, aside from the Waldorf penthouse, all liquid marital assets have been split 50/50. You'll be walking away with millions. Harrison slid a thick folder across the table. Also, Miss Sterling is gifting you an additional piece of real estate as a severance. The deed transfer is on the last page. Just sign on the dotted line. It was the West Village condo. Julian stared at the address, stunned. He remembered telling her years ago that he liked that neighborhood. She left me nothing else? No letter? No message? Julian choked out. The alarm code for the West Village condo is the date of your 9th wedding anniversary. The exact day she found out you were cheating on her. The lawyer stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Off the record? As an attorney, I'm not supposed to judge. But looking at you right now, I don't feel an ounce of pity. She threw away her 20s on a guy who didn't appreciate her. I think she got out at exactly the right time. Before walking away, Harrison delivered the final blow. Miss Sterling asked me to wish you a happy birthday. The condo and the divorce papers are her final gifts to you. Enjoy. Final. The word echoed in Julian's skull. They had sworn vows in front of a priest, but barely into their 9th year, he had totally blown it and lost the only woman who truly had his back. Julian stumbled out of the coffee shop feeling completely hollowed out. It was a gorgeous, sunny New York afternoon, but Julian felt freezing cold. They say that when someone truly gives up on you, they don't scream or throw things. They pick a nice sunny morning, put on their coat, close the door quietly, and just disappear. That's exactly what Eleanor did. Julian hailed a yellow cab. West Village, he muttered. He stood in front of the door. 9th wedding anniversary. He punched in the code. Harrison's words ringing in his ears. When the door clicked open, Julian was left breathless. The entire condo was flawlessly decorated to his exact taste. Built-in mahogany bookshelves, vintage medical journals, lush indoor plants. On the coffee table sat a hardcover book he had left half-read at the penthouse. Poking out of the top was a quirky, cat-shaped bookmark Eleanor had bought him in a boutique years ago. If Eleanor had been standing in the kitchen, Julian would have believed they had lived here their whole lives. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. Tracing his thumb over the metal bookmark, tears finally spilled over his lashes. But it was far too late. Julian, do you feel differently about me now? Have you fallen for me even a little bit? Not just as a friend, but real love? Eleanor, liking someone isn't love. People who aren't in love shouldn't get married. His own arrogant words from a decade ago echoed mockingly in his head. What had he been thinking? Sitting on the dining table were the anniversary gifts she had bought him over the years. Happy birthday, Julian. Meanwhile, what had he gotten her? A pair of standard pearl earrings, a desk lamp, a generic clock, and concert tickets. His gifts were afterthoughts compared to the incredibly thoughtful, priceless things she showered him with. Eleanor had told him back then, Julian, I don't care about the price tag. I just want you to mean it. So, Julian had meant it. He had handed his heart over to her years ago. He was just too stubborn and damaged to admit it. Happy anniversary. I hope we're together forever. Julian looked at the preserved roses he had bought her 3 years ago. But preserved flowers expire. Just like his marriage. I'm so damn sorry, Julian whispered to the empty room. At that moment, his phone started buzzing relentlessly. It was Chloe. For the first time, Julian felt a surge of absolute revulsion seeing her name. He ignored it, but she kept calling back. Julian finally snapped and answered. Chloe, what? I'm busy. Chloe paused. Julian had never used that tone with her before. Before she could play the victim, he cut her off. Chloe, this was a massive mistake. I should have shut this down immediately, but I was stupid. I'm married. What I feel for Eleanor isn't habit. It's love. I'm not leaving her. Julian was rambling, totally unhinged by grief. Distance finally gave him the courage to face reality. We're done talking. What happened between us in high school needs to stay in the past. Julian, what are you talking about? Chloe shrieked. How can you love a snob like Eleanor Sterling? She's just a vain, materialistic trust fund baby. Chloe, what is wrong with you? Julian was disgusted. There's nothing wrong with me. Julian, don't let her manipulate you. We're soulmates. You know you've always loved me. You can't just end this. Chloe began to sob theatrically. Julian rubbed his eyes. Chloe, we need to settle this in person. Okay, she agreed instantly. I'll come to the Waldorf penthouse. No. That's Eleanor's property. Not mine, Julian stated flatly. What? You let her keep the penthouse? Julian, are you an idiot? You could have bought her off with a cash settlement. Do you know what real estate on the Upper East Side is worth? Chloe's voice went shrill. Julian's jaw tightened. Meet me at the coffee shop across from Street Luke's. He was starting to connect the dots, but he needed to see her face when he confronted her. An hour later, Julian sat at a corner table. He was 30 minutes early, a lifelong quirk. Julian, why are you always insanely early for everything? Because I despise things being out of my control. In other words, he was terrified of unpredictability. Eleanor had just smiled that warm, understanding smile of hers. Back then, Julian didn't realize that Eleanor would be the most unpredictable, chaotic, beautiful thing to ever happen to his rigidly controlled life. Julian, did you wait long? Chloe rushed in, breathless. She was late. Julian checked his watch, $100,000 Breguet Marine. For the brilliant surgeon who treats time like gold, here's a watch so you'll think of me every time you check your schedule. Eleanor's laughter echoed in his head. Julian? Chloe waved a hand in front of his face. Julian snapped back to the present. He stared at her coldly. How did you know Eleanor and I were getting a divorce? It was a sealed legal proceeding he had literally just found out about hours ago. Chloe stammered, caught off guard by his hostility. She gritted her teeth. I told her to divorce you. I told her you didn't love her and she was pathetic for staying. The blood in Julian's veins turned to ice. Chloe had orchestrated the entire blow-up. How could the innocent girl from his teenage memories turn into this? He let out a dark, bitter laugh. You really played yourself, Chloe. As Chloe stared at him in confusion, Julian's voice dropped dead quiet. Eleanor is a billionaire. She's the CEO of the Sterling Group. The Waldorf penthouse has been in her name since day one. What? Chloe's face went slack. Stop messing around, Julian. I'm dead serious. You know I don't joke about facts. That's impossible. How could she be the CEO? She was just a stay-at-home wife that you paid for. Chloe shook her head violently. Julian, stop trying to test me. I love you. Rich or poor. I love you. She grabbed for his hands across the table, but he yanked them away. Chloe, I'm a hospital employee. I'm not the Wall Street tycoon you think I am. Liar, Chloe scoffed, looking him up and down. The watch, the tailored suit. The shoes you're wearing, 50 grand right now. Before flying back to New York, Chloe had Googled him obsessively. Julian was constantly featured in NY Society magazines as a discreet, high-net-worth bachelor surgeon. He drove imported sports cars and wore bespoke everything. Julian, are you mad because I told her to leave you? I did it to save you. I didn't want you trapped in a loveless marriage. Chloe forced tears into her eyes, looking at him with practiced devotion. I love Eleanor, Julian said, his voice cracking. I've always loved her. Chloe froze as if she'd been slapped. Clue, listen to me. Every single luxury you've seen me enjoy over the last decade was bought and paid for by Eleanor. I've been living on her dime for 9 years. Do you get it now? Julian felt zero shame admitting it anymore. He had been too insecure to admit that a woman took better care of him than he did himself. Julian stared at Chloe with pity. I don't know what your endgame was with Eleanor, but if I took you in, it wasn't out of love. It was my own bruised ego because you dumped me in high school. He let out a dry laugh. Do you even remember how we started dating back then? Chloe blanched. She had totally orchestrated their meet cute in high school. Did he know? I don't care about the past anymore, Julian growled. But what I do care about is what you said to my wife. Tell me exactly what lies you fed Eleanor. Her gold digger fantasy shattered. Chloe dropped the act. She refused to meet his eyes. I just told her you were going to divorce her. I answered your phone a few times when she called, and I made sure she thought we were sleeping together. Even now, Chloe's brain was doing the math. Even if the sterling fortune wasn't his, Julian was a top-tier neurosurgeon making high six figures. That was still a massive upgrade for her. Julian, I messed up. But Eleanor is gone. You're legally divorced. We can. Stop talking, Julian interrupted, his voice laced with pure disgust. Who even are you? What happened to the Chloe I knew? That question shattered the last of Chloe's patience. I've always been this way, and you knew that. You pined after me for a decade while I was studying abroad, and now you want the moral high ground? Chloe sneered viciously. You married the perfect wife, but you couldn't let go of your high school fantasy. Now that your perfect wife has left you in the dust, you're calling me despicable? You're the coward, Julian. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too, and you ended up destroying Eleanor in the process. Her screeching words hit Julian like a freight train. He couldn't defend himself because she was absolutely right. I totally misjudged you, Chloe spat, grabbing her purse. I thought you were a whale, but you were just Eleanor Sterling's kept man. Listen up, you're going to wire me $1 million by Friday. If you don't, I'm going to the hospital board and the tabloids. Since the gig was up, Chloe decided to go for extortion. She smirked. You wouldn't want your fancy medical colleagues knowing you're a cheating fraud who's been living a double life, would you? Julian didn't even blink. Go right ahead. Do your worst. He stood up, looking down at her like a bug. I deserve whatever karma is coming my way for losing Eleanor. But you, Chloe? Julian shook his head. You're going to learn the hard way that there are no shortcuts in life. With that, Julian walked out of the cafe, leaving Chloe fuming at the table. He didn't care about his reputation anymore. He just needed to find Eleanor, drop to his knees, and beg for mercy. Meanwhile, at Chicago O'Hare, the moment Eleanor stepped out of the arrivals terminal, she was swept into a massive bear hug by her longtime college friend, Wyatt. Eleanor! You finally bailed on New York. We're gonna crush the market out here. Eleanor laughed softly. Sure, you'll take all the credit and I'll do all the heavy lifting. Hey, if we launch this firm together, it's a 50-over-50 split. I've been dying without you, Wyatt joked dramatically. Relax. I'll have Audrey send you some of our best analysts. But I'm not taking half. I'm moving Sterling Group's HQ here. I'm going to be swamped. Damn, Elle. You made massive moves behind my back. Wait, what about your husband? What's his face? Wyatt raised an eyebrow. Divorced him. I'm single, she said coolly. Saying it out loud didn't hurt nearly as much as she thought it would. Sometimes, a bad relationship is like a splinter deep in your hand. You're terrified to pull it out because you know it'll bleed, but once you finally yank it free, the relief is instant. Eleanor looked up at the Chicago skyline. Julian, I don't know if signing those papers broke your heart or made you happy. And honestly, I don't care anymore. Well, since you're single, I'm setting you up. Chicago has top-tier talent, Wyatt grinned, throwing an arm around her shoulder. Bring it on. Eleanor smiled. That night, under the neon lights of the Windy City, she drank, danced, and laughed until she couldn't breathe. The next morning, back in the West Village, Julian woke up in a cold sweat. He had spent the entire night tormented by dreams of Eleanor. The woman who used to be the first thing he saw every morning was now only a ghost in his sleep. Julian spent hours calling every mutual acquaintance they had, but Eleanor's friends stonewalled him. Julian, leave her alone. She's way out of your league anyway. One of Eleanor's Ivy League friends snapped before hanging up on him. Rubbing his pounding temples, Julian went to shower when his cell rang. It was the street, Luke's administration office. Doctor, Mercer, we have a massive PR crisis. Get to the hospital immediately. Julian threw on a suit and sped to the hospital. Dr. Mercer. Thank God. A senior floor nurse gave him a highly strained, sympathetic look. Did a patient code? Julian instantly thought of Chloe's blackmail threat. Had she actually gone to the press? No, it's just go to the chief of medicine's office, the nurse stammered, avoiding eye contact. In the executive office, Julian sat stiffly across from the chief of medicine. A cup of untouched black coffee sat between them. Are you firing me? Julian asked bluntly. Julian, relax. The board just feels you need a sabbatical. We're placing you on a mandatory 6-month administrative leave. The chief offered a tight, corporate smile. Julian's jaw clenched. You don't put a tenured top-billing neurosurgeon on forced leave without cause. The chief sighed, taking off his glasses. Do you really want me to spell it out? You're brilliant, Julian. But Street Lukes is a business. The only reason you had a blank check for your department was because Miss Sterling was footing the bill. The MRI machines, the experimental grants, all of it came from her. Julian went completely silent. What do you mean? You seriously didn't know? The chief looked genuinely shocked. When you were hired, Miss Sterling signed a massive endowment deal with the hospital. The only stipulation was that you were given total autonomy and priority OR scheduling. We loved having a star surgeon, but the only reason you became untouchable was her money. The chief leaned forward. If you ever speak to her, thank her for keeping this wing of the hospital afloat. I will, Julian whispered. But he knew he'd never get the chance. Thank you for the opportunity. He stood up, shook the chief's hand, and walked out. Back in his office, Julian stared blankly at the walls. 8 years. For 8 years, Eleanor had paved his path with gold, never once taking credit, never once throwing it in his face. Her love was an invisible shield protecting him from the real world. Julian packed his belongings into a cardboard box. The 2 butterfly fish swam circles in their tank, totally unaware that the couple who bought them had permanently shattered. Dr. Mercer, you'll still be consulting, right? Several of his patients and junior residents gathered in the hall, looking gutted to see him go. Despite his icy bedside manner, his surgical outcomes were legendary. I'll be back in an OR eventually, Julian offered a hollow smile. He needed to hit pause. He needed to figure out how to be a man worthy of Eleanor. Julian locked himself inside the West Village condo for a week. He survived on takeout and slept for 14 hours a day to escape reality. One afternoon, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A tiny spark of hope flared in his chest. Eleanor, he answered. Julian, please, you have to help me. It was Chloe, sounding utterly hysterical. Julian hung his head. Chloe, stop calling me. If you're in trouble, call the cops. No, they're coming for me. Julian, it's all over the internet. I'm going to jail. Frowning, Julian flipped open his laptop and pulled up the New York Post. The headline dominated the homepage. The fake heiress, how Chloe Sinclair scammed her way through high society. Julian clicked the article. It was a brutal, meticulously documented exposé. Chloe had fabricated her degrees, forged bank statements, and defrauded half a dozen wealthy married men in Europe before fleeing back to the U.S. Dozens of victims' wives had banded together, releasing bank transfers, text logs, and security footage of Chloe stealing jewelry from their homes. Julian felt his blood run cold. The innocent first love he had jeopardized his marriage for was a professional con artist. Chloe, I was just another mark to you, wasn't I? Julian asked numbly. Julian, I'm sorry. I had to survive. You don't get it. You guys were born into wealth. I didn't have anything. Chloe shrieked through the phone. You had everything, Julian snapped. You had a great family. You were smart, you got a full ride abroad. You threw it away to become a parasite. You don't understand how unfair the world is, Chloe sobbed. Please, just wire me the money so I can leave the country. You're the only one who can save me. You need to face the consequences of your own actions, Chloe. Do not ever call this number again. Julian hung up and immediately blocked the caller ID. 2 days later, Julian saw the follow-up news. The Ivy League university Chloe claimed to attend publicly, stated she was a fraud. Warrants were issued for wire fraud. Julian turned off the TV, stared at the butterfly fish, and made a decision. He was going to Chicago. Meanwhile, in downtown Chicago, Eleanor was thriving. She had just closed a multi-million-dollar real estate deal for an off-campus student housing high-rise. Miss Sterling, I have to admit, you're a shark at the negotiating table. Are all New York executives as ruthless as you? A rival developer chuckled, offering her a handshake. Eleanor smiled sharply. We don't play nice when it comes to real estate. We get what we want. Can I buy you a celebratory dinner? The developer asked smoothly. I'm swamped with the zoning permits, but rain check. Eleanor deflected effortlessly, walking away with Audrey. Returning to her sprawling new Chicago estate, Eleanor was greeted by the chaotic barking of her two new dogs, a golden retriever and a Samoyed. Julian's extreme OCD meant they could never have pets. Now, the sprawling backyard was covered in chew toys. Eleanor, I made you some warm peach cobbler. Wash up, Martha, her childhood nanny and housekeeper, called from the kitchen. Coming, Martha. Eleanor grinned, tossing her heels in the hallway. When she lived in New York, Julian hated having the help in their private space, so Martha rarely visited. Now, Martha had her own private wing in the Chicago house. Sitting at the kitchen island, eating cobbler, while the dogs snored at her feet, Eleanor felt a wave of absolute peace. I was happy with Julian, she thought. But this is actual freedom. Martha, do you think I'll end up a crazy dog lady living alone forever? Eleanor joked. Martha patted her hand. You'll live exactly how you want to, sweetheart, and you've always got me. That night, Eleanor slept an unbroken 8 hours. A week later, Julian was standing in Times Square when he looked up at the massive Jumbotron. An anchor from CNBC was doing a segment on urban development. Chicago's newest power player, Eleanor Sterling, is revolutionizing affordable student housing in the Midwest. Julian stood frozen on the busy sidewalk as pedestrians bumped past him. He stared at the screen. Eleanor looked breathtaking. She was wearing a sharp, tailored suit, speaking with total authority. During their marriage, she had purposely dimmed her own light to cater to his introverted, quiet lifestyle. He had entirely forgotten that the woman he married was an apex predator in the boardroom. Julian practically sprinted to his apartment, booked a flight to O'Hare, and packed a duffel bag. Upon landing in Chicago, he was hit by a wall of freezing autumn rain. The Midwest chill bit right through his coat. That exact night, Eleanor was attending a high society gala at the Drake Hotel, hosted by Wyatt's firm. Top executives from tech and real estate were mingling under crystal chandeliers. Eleanor looked stunning in a backless emerald green Burberry gown. Eleanor, you look like $1,000,000. Wyatt toasted her with a martini. Before she could reply, a tall, striking guy with jet black hair and intense blue eyes walked up. He looked like he belonged on a GQ cover. Miss Sterling, care to dance? He asked smoothly. Sure. What's your name? Eleanor asked, intrigued by his confidence. Liam Harrington. Let's go, Mr. Harrington. As Liam spun her across the dance floor, he pulled her in close. The chemistry was instant and effortless. After the song, they stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. The wind whipped Eleanor's hair, and Liam reached out, gently tucking a stray curl behind her ear. Eleanor? The hoarse, broken voice made Eleanor turn around. Julian was standing by the balcony doors, soaking wet from the rain, looking utterly shattered. Eleanor's expression didn't change. Julian, what are you doing here? Liam sized up the soaking wet guy instantly. Everything okay here, Eleanor? It's fine, Liam. He's my ex-husband, Eleanor said smoothly. Liam smirked slightly. Gotcha. I'll give you 2 a minute. Save the next dance for me, yeah? Liam walked past Julian, intentionally brushing his shoulder. You fumbled a good one, man, Liam muttered so only Julian could hear. Julian flinched. He stared at Eleanor, who was looking at him like a stranger who had just bumped into her at a grocery store. How did you find me? Eleanor asked. I called an old med school buddy who works in Chicago. He mentioned this gala, Julian said, his voice trembling. He took a step toward her. Eleanor, I am so sorry. I ruined everything. Eleanor held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. We're divorced, Julian. Your apologies don't do anything for me anymore. I know, Julian choked out. I just needed to say it to your face. I took you for granted. I was a broken, insecure idiot who was obsessed with the one that got away, and I completely neglected the incredible woman standing right in front of me. You were right to leave. Julian's eyes were red and pleading. Can you ever give me another chance? Eleanor looked at him, feeling a strange twinge of pity, but absolutely zero romantic love. She understood his psychology perfectly. His traumatic childhood and his mother's emotional abuse had turned him into an avoidant, paranoid man who constantly pushed people away to test if they would stay. But she was done playing therapist to a grown man. I'm sorry, Julian, but no. There is no future for us, Eleanor said softly, but with absolute finality. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. The reality of it hit him like a physical blow. Eleanor stepped closer, her perfume washing over him, and gently adjusted his crooked collar. Julian, our chapter is over. I truly hope you find someone who loves you. But before you do that, you need to get into intensive therapy. She stepped back. I've realized I didn't love you as much as I thought I did. I'm doing just fine without you. You're sick, Julian. Fix yourself. With that, Eleanor walked back into the ballroom, leaving Julian standing alone in the freezing Chicago wind. He stood there for an hour until a hotel waiter finally asked him to leave. Over the next 2 weeks, Liam Harrington practically lived at the Sterling Group offices. The 25-year-old heir to the Harrington logistics empire had quit his cushy corporate job to aggressively court Eleanor. Got you an iced Americano, boss, Liam grinned, dropping the coffee on Eleanor's desk. Eleanor sighed, rubbing her temples. Liam, you are supposed to be interning for my risk assessment team, not playing barista. I'm assessing the risk of you working yourself to death. Liam shot back, unfazed. Eleanor couldn't help but laugh. Around all the stiff corporate suits, Liam's golden retriever energy was a breath of fresh air. Fine, but I'm buying lunch today. Pick a spot. Meanwhile, Julian was trapped in a hell of his own making. He had caught a severe flu from standing out in the rain and was hallucinating in a downtown Chicago hotel room. He kept dreaming of his mother screaming at him to study and of the day he operated on Eleanor to save her life. When his fever finally broke, he went for a walk to clear his head. As he crossed a busy intersection, he was entirely zoned out. Screech crash! A sleek Maserati slammed on its brakes, the bumper clipping Julian and sending him sprawling across the wet asphalt. Inside the car, Liam gripped the steering wheel, panic-stricken. Holy shit! He just walked right out into traffic. Eleanor threw open the passenger door and ran to the victim. Her stomach dropped. Julian? An hour later, Julian was lying in a bed at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, sporting a fractured wrist and several stitches. Liam paced the room angrily. The cop said, I'm getting my license suspended for 3 months. But dude, you literally walked out in front of a moving car on a red light. I'm sorry, Julian muttered numbly, looking only at Eleanor. I was distracted. Eleanor stared at the dark circles under Julian's eyes and the track marks from the IVs in his arms. He looked like a ghost of the arrogant surgeon she used to know. Are you taking your medication? Are you seeing a therapist like I told you? Julian nodded slowly. I made an appointment. I remember everything you said. The air in the room was thick and suffocating. Eleanor stood up. I'll have Audrey cover your medical bills. Get some rest. As she turned to leave, Julian grabbed the edge of her jacket. Will you visit me? Just once in a while? He asked, his voice totally defeated. Eleanor looked at his desperate eyes, then gently pulled her jacket free. I'm running a company, Julian. I really don't have the time. Julian dropped his hand. Right. Take care of yourself, Eleanor. You too. Eleanor walked out, letting the heavy hospital door click shut behind her. She never visited him again. It took a solid 6 to 8 weeks for Julian's wrist to heal. During that time, his only visitors were Audrey, dropping off legal paperwork, and surprisingly, Liam. Liam would pop in occasionally, not out of malice, but pure curiosity. So, what exactly did you do to screw up a marriage with a billionaire baddie? Liam asked one afternoon, tossing an apple in the air. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, right? I gotta study the competition so I don't make the same mistakes. Julian just smiled sadly. He actually appreciated Liam's bluntness. Through Liam's careless chatter, Julian learned that Eleanor was happier, healthier, and crushing it in the business world. He realized that stepping out of her life was the best thing he had ever done for her. Before leaving Chicago, Julian asked Audrey to arrange one final meeting with Eleanor. She has exactly 10 minutes. Millennium Park. 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday. Audrey texted back. Tuesday at 3:30. It was freezing. The sky was the color of slate. Julian waited by the bean, clutching a bouquet of primroses, a flower symbolizing a promise to love someone eternally. Eleanor walked up, wrapped in a heavy trench coat. I'm 2 minutes late. Sorry, she said briskly, knowing how much Julian used to hate tardiness. It's okay. Julian handed her the flowers. For you? Eleanor took them, slightly surprised. Thanks. Did you need something specific? I have a board meeting at 4. Just then, a light dusting of snow began to fall. The first snow of the season in Chicago. It's snowing, Julian noted softly. Years ago, Eleanor had begged him to go to Alaska with her, so they could watch the first snow together and renew their vows. He had been too busy at the hospital. Eleanor looked up at the flurries. Julian, if this is about getting back together, it's not. Julian interrupted with a gentle smile. I just wanted to formally say goodbye. I'm flying back to New York tomorrow. I'm moving into a private practice and focusing on my therapy. He looked at her, his eyes shining. I know I don't deserve you, and I know I can't make you happy anymore. But I just needed you to know that I do love you. I always will. Eleanor listened in silence. A year ago, she would have killed to hear those words. Now, they just felt like an echo from a past life. I hope you find peace, Julian, Eleanor said genuinely. She reached out and brushed a snowflake off his shoulder. Let's leave the past in the past. We both need to move forward. Yeah, Julian nodded. You go first. I want to watch you walk away this time. He remembered all the times he had turned his back on her in the past to rush to the hospital or to Chloe. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She gave him a small, final smile, turned on her heel, and walked away into the falling snow. The seasons changed, years blurred together. Eleanor's affordable housing project expanded across the Midwest. Liam Harrington ended up moving back to his family's corporate office in California, and Eleanor spent a year traveling the globe, solo hiking the Grand Canyon, diving the Great Barrier Reef, chasing the Northern Lights. Standing in front of Yosemite Falls in California, Eleanor pulled out her phone and logged into a private Instagram account she hadn't touched in years. She deleted all the old photos of her and Julian, replacing them with a single picture of the waterfall. The caption read, "Finding peace in the chaos. Finally free." In a quiet apartment in New York, Julian liked the photo. A lifetime is a long time, but some people stay forever frozen in the moment you leave them. 2 years later, Eleanor flew back to New York for an urban development summit. She was currently the keynote speaker. Sitting in her VIP dressing room, a makeup artist was powdering her nose. Eleanor looked in the mirror. She looked powerful, unbreakable. Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. Are you kidding me? Is that Chloe Sinclair? The fake heiress who scammed half of Manhattan? A stylist's loud voice carried through the door. Who let her in here to do makeup? Gross, check your bags, people. Eleanor frowned. Audrey, go see what's happening. A moment later, Audrey returned, hauling a frail, exhausted-looking woman behind her. It was Chloe, but she looked nothing like the glamorous mean girl from high school. She was bone-thin, wearing faded jeans, and her eyes were completely dead. Miss Sterling, Audrey said in a low voice. They caught her trying to sneak water from the catering table. They were going to call security. Chloe couldn't even look Eleanor in the eye. Let her go, Eleanor said smoothly. She didn't feel an ounce of vindictiveness. The universe had already taken its toll on Chloe Sinclair. Thank you, Chloe whispered, her voice cracking, as she practically ran out of the room. That night, Eleanor stopped by the Waldorf penthouse one last time to grab some old paperwork. The place was exactly as she left it. She poured herself a glass of Perrier-Jouët champagne and looked out over the Manhattan skyline. Over the last few years, she had dated a few great guys. But she always ended things before they got too serious. Living independently was its own kind of luxury. The next morning, Eleanor drove out to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. It was the anniversary of her father's passing. She walked up to the family plot holding a bottle of Napa Valley red wine, only to find a fresh bouquet of white daisies already resting against the headstone. Julian was standing there, his hands shoved in his pockets. Audrey told me you still drop by every year, Eleanor said. Not surprised. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to run into you. I can leave. Julian stammered, his old arrogant edge completely gone. He looked much healthier now, grounded and calm. You don't have to leave. Thank you for visiting him, Eleanor said, pouring the wine over the earth. How have you been, Julian? I've been good. Therapy helps. Julian offered a small, self-deprecating smile. You? I've been great. Eleanor looked at him clearly. Julian, I'm flying back to Chicago tomorrow. I don't plan on coming back to New York much anymore. I just wanted to say, I don't hate you. But my stance hasn't changed. There is no us in the future. I know. Julian nodded softly. Just seeing you doing so well is enough for me. I don't expect anything else. Take care of yourself, Julian. Eleanor turned to walk down the cemetery path. Let's not do this again. Goodbye, Eleanor.